By the dawn of the 20th century, the golden mask of the Gilded Age was beginning to crumble. The railroads that once symbolized boundless progress now symbolized monopoly. The palaces of Fifth Avenue sparkled, but their light cast long shadows across tenement alleys and factory towns. America had grown rich, staggeringly rich, but restless. The poor were tired of waiting for prosperity to trickle down. The middle class was weary of corruption, and the young, those born after the Civil War, dreamed of a nation more just, more humane, more honest. It was as though the nation awoke one morning and saw itself clearly in the mirror for the first time. And what it saw was not just gold, it was rust, soot, and greed. The first great cry for change came not from politicians, but from writers. They were called Muckrakers, a term coined by President Theodore Roosevelt, half insult and half honor. These journalists plunged their pens into the filth of corruption and hauled it into the daylight. Ida Tarbell, the daughter of an oilman crushed by Rockefeller's empire, wrote a devastating expose, The History of the Standard Oil Company, 1804, which laid bare the ruthless tactics of monopoly. Upton Sinclair, with his shocking novel The Jungle, 1906, peeled back the curtain on Chicago's meatpacking plants, revealing not only rotten meat, but the rotting of the human spirit in industrial labor. Lincoln Steffens' The Shame of the Cities, 1904, revealed the bribery and moral decay that infected urban politics. Their words stirred the nation. For the first time, ordinary Americans saw the truth behind the gleaming facade, and they demanded reform. Into this storm rode a man as bold as the age itself, Theodore Roosevelt, a hero of the Spanish-American War, where he led the Rough Riders up San Juan Hill. Roosevelt was no ordinary politician. He was energy incarnate, a blend of cowboy, scholar, and crusader. When President William McKinley was assassinated in 1901, Roosevelt, just 42 years old, became the youngest president in US history. He vowed to make the presidency the bully pulpit of reform. He challenged the titans of industry, declaring war on the malefactors of great wealth. Through the Sherman Antitrust Act, he broke apart monopolies like the Northern Securities Company, forcing the great trusts to bow before the law. He became known as the Trust Buster. But Roosevelt was not anti-business, he was pro-fairness. He believed that capitalism should serve the people, not enslave them. His famous Square Deal promised a fair shake for every man, balancing labor, capital, and the public good. He even turned his gaze to the earth itself, creating national parks, protecting 230 million acres of wilderness, and laying the foundation for America's modern environmental conscience. Roosevelt roared through the early 1900s like a whirlwind of reform, and the people loved him for it. But Roosevelt was not alone. Across the nation, 1,000 smaller revolutions began to bloom. In cities, reformers fought to clean up the slums. Jane Addams, at Hull House in Chicago, provided education, shelter, and hope to the poor. Jacob Riis, whose photographs in How the Other Half Lives had shocked the nation a decade earlier, continued to expose the misery of tenement life. In factories, the labor movement pushed for safety laws and shorter hours. Tragedies like the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire in 1911, which killed 146 young women trapped behind locked doors, ignited national outrage. By 1914, most states had passed child labor laws, workplace safety standards, and minimum wage protections for women. And in the halls of power, the structure of democracy itself began to change. The 17th Amendment, 1913, allowed citizens to elect senators directly. The initiative, referendum, and recall gave people a voice in local government. The progressive movement was not one revolution, but 1,000 small awakenings, all bound by the belief that America could do better, that it must do better. Nowhere did the spirit of reform burn brighter than in the hearts of women. After decades of being silenced, women began to claim the rights long denied them. Susan B. Anthony had died in 1906, never seeing victory, but her torch was carried by Carrie Chapman Catt, Alice Paul, and Ida B. Wells, who fused feminism with the fight against racial injustice. Women marched, picketed, and were even jailed for demanding the right to vote. Their struggle was no longer a polite appeal, it was a movement. And though the full triumph would come in 1920, with the 19th Amendment, it was the progressive era that made it unstoppable. Beyond suffrage, women also led the charge for temperance, education reform, and public health. Florence Kelley fought for labor protections. Margaret Sanger began her controversial campaign for birth control, challenging laws that bound women's bodies to silence. The daughters of the Gilded Age were becoming the architects of modern equality. After Roosevelt came William Howard Taft, a cautious man who preferred law to drama. He continued trust-busting and strengthened the Interstate Commerce Commission, but his gentler approach disappointed Roosevelt, who accused him of betraying the progressive cause. Their split would divide the Republican Party and set the stage for the election of Woodrow Wilson in 1912. Wilson, a scholar president with a preacher's intensity, pushed reform to new heights. He created the Federal Reserve System 1913, giving America a stable banking backbone. He established the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, to regulate unfair business practices. He championed the Clayton Antitrust Act, the Underwood Tariff, and a modern income tax to balance the scales of wealth. Under Wilson, the government became not just a regulator, but a moral force and agent of fairness in the marketplace. The progressive era was not a utopia. Racism persisted, Jim Crow laws darkened the South, and segregation infected the federal government under Wilson's watch. Industrial growth continued to wound the environment and exploit the poor. But for the first time, the people were trying to make things right. Progress was messy, uneven, and incomplete, but it was progress nonetheless. The ideals forged in the fires of this era, fair labor, clean government, social justice, and equal rights, became the moral foundation of 20th century America. Then, just as the nation seemed to be finding its balance, the world erupted. In 1914, Europe plunged into the inferno of World War I. By 1917, America would be drawn in, and the dream of progress would collide with the brutal reality of global conflict. The Gilded Age gave America its wealth. The progressive era gave it its soul. One built towers of steel. The other built the laws and ideals that kept them standing. One celebrated the triumph of the few. The other fought for the dignity of the many. Together, they forged modern America, land forever caught between its hunger for greatness and its yearning for goodness. And if the Gilded Age glittered like gold, the progressive era glowed like fire, not the fire of greed, but the fire of conscience.